Hello, my name is Benjelloun. I am currently a postdoc researcher at the Institut de Physique du Globe in Paris, and I will be talking about a major earthquake sequence that happened in northern Mongolia at the beginning of the 20th century on the Bulnay-Tsetserleg fault system. This work is the result of a collaboration between several institutes from France, South Korea, and Mongolia. As you can see on the field photo on the right, the Bulnay-Tsetserleg earthquake has left an impressive morphological signature in the landscape. It is very well preserved, even after more than 1 century. So this provided a good opportunity to carry out a detailed assessment of the surface deformation using drone acquisition for photogrammetry, but it also offered a challenge in terms of paleoseismic investigations. The Bulnay-Tsetserleg fault zone is located in what we can call a slowly deforming continental interior. As shown in the yellow box, it extends in the northwest of Mongolia and is composed of an east-west left-lateral fault with several major branches. Interestingly, the country has been struck by several high-magnitude earthquakes in the last century, both along the Bulnay fault system and the other transcurrent structures that lie in the west and southwest of the country. Another one nucleated in 1957 on the Mogot fault, which appears as a smaller isolated structure in the middle of the country. Now, let us zoom in on the Bulnay area where this series of modern earthquakes initiated. The 1905 sequence was composed of 2 successive earthquakes. The magnitude was estimated around 8 for each of them. The first one happened on July 9th and propagated along the Tsetserleg fault, which is delimited on this rupture map by a gray overlay. This is a major synthetic branch located north of the main Bulnay fault. 2 weeks later, a second earthquake ruptured the whole Bulnay fault along almost 400 kilometers. The rupture also propagated along another secondary structure in the west, the Terektin fault, which is an antithetic branch extending south of the main Bulnay fault. And in the center, it seems that the Dungen fault, which is a small perpendicular branch located north of the main fault, was also activated. The whole sequence represents an impressive 676 km long rupture, which makes it the largest continental strike-slip sequence documented. Because of its geometrical complexity and the good degree of preservation in the landscape, it constitutes a good case to study how the coseismic deformation is expressed on the different branches at the surface. The second aspect of this project deals with the past earthquake history of this fault zone. Using paleoseismic techniques, we want to see if similar sequences, which involve the main fault and secondary branches altogether, happened in the past. And if yes, we can question whether this behavior is consistent through all the last seismic cycles that we can document. If you've watched the presentation of my colleague Jin Choi, you already know that the coseismic slip distribution along the main Bulnay fault is now well constrained thanks to horizontal offset measurements. Along the Tsetserleg fault, this is less the case because the dataset is much smaller. So we tried another approach. We wanted to extract the coseismic slip from the geometry and the whole surface expression of the rupture. To do this, we acquired large sets of photographs with a drone on 6 sites along the rupture. These sites were selected in order to get a significant development of surface fractures and wide damage zones. This is why they are located at points of geometrical complexity. Remember also that one site, SS1, in the southwest, is located on a small conjugate branch of Tsetserleg. The image datasets were processed into high-resolution DEMs with the MicMac software. Here are displayed the native resolutions of the drone photos, so the resolution of the final DEMs range from 12 to 24 centimeters. We obtain good horizontal and vertical accuracy levels for the DEMs with errors lower than 15 centimeters. Then, once we had our DEMs, I mapped the various morphological features associated with the rupture. You have here at the top an example for site SP11, the shaded DEM with the fractures drawn in color depending on their relative orientation, as well as the drainage network. I measured in a systematic way the crack width. By this, I mean the opening of the crack measured perpendicularly to its long axis. This is represented by the blue measurement on the sketch on the left. This data is displayed as red dots in the middle. In parallel, I checked for evidence of vertical deformation, but I did not find anything significant or consistent across the different sites. So we assumed that these values of crack opening could be related to the horizontal surface slip. If we project the crack width values along the main direction of the fault, we obtain the graph at the bottom. You can see that the values show a high degree of scatter, but if we try to look for the most significant range of values with a simple histogram on the right, it seems that we have an important cluster of values around 3 meters. And what is interesting is that when this range is compared to the horizontal offsets measured in Choi 2018 study, we obtain something consistent. And if you look at the comparison for the southwestern section, it seems that we are even able to discriminate well the slip on the Tsetserleg fault, see the two black dots on the left, and its small conjugate branch, see the two values of Choi in red, and our value for site SS1 in white. This seems to validate our hypothesis about the projected crack width as a proxy for surface slip. Finally, if we come back to the histogram of the projected values, you can see 3 other clusters of points higher than the main cloud of the coseismic values, around 5, 7, and 9 meters. This is something that we observe for all the other sites with similar ranges. We propose that these values may correspond to cumulative deformation. This implies that some features were partly preserved and reactivated through several successive cycles. The fine mapping of the surface damage also allowed us to identify interesting markers which document the way the 1905 earthquake propagated. In this example, we have a long oblique crack that is left laterally offset by 2 meters across the fault. Some analogous markers were seen on the field along the trace of the 2001 Kunlun earthquake. This suggests that because the rupture front propagates faster at depth, it causes tension cracks to open first, as depicted on the picture on the right. And then, in a second stage, it reaches the surface and causes these early markers to be laterally offset, as shown in the picture in the middle. In addition, in certain sites, we have clues that confirm the presence of the cumulative deformation that I mentioned before. Some features have a distinct, smoother morphological expression. See, for example, the small thrusts visible in the top left image under the Bull 193 name. And compare them with the thrusts just on the right from the large fracture where they appear left laterally offset. In the other example, at the bottom, we have a complex network of fractures, and we can propose that some of them, for example, those that we pointed with arrows, were formed during pre-1905 earthquakes with a slightly different rupture geometry. In order to dig further into this evidence of older earthquakes and to constrain their ages, we opened 2 perpendicular trenches at 2 different sites along the Tsetserleg fault, where no paleoseismic data exist at the moment. The barbecue site at the top and the Tess River site, shown at the bottom, both correspond to linear fault scarplets facing counterslope. We also studied a natural fault exposure in a deeply incised gully located on the Bulnay fault west of the junction with Dungen and Tsetserleg faults. On Tsetserleg, the sites displayed contrasting sedimentary units, with coarse and massive units for barbecue at the top, and much finer and layered units for Tess at the bottom. Some of you may already see on the barbecue mosaic 2 fault zones displacing the superficial units At the other one, you have clear evidence of thrusting right in the middle of the wall. Here I show you the interpreted logs of the eastern walls of both sites. It was possible to find evidence for 3 events at Barbecue and 4 events at Tess. The corresponding horizons have been drawn in orange. The 1905 earthquake is clearly visible at both sites, with fault strengths displacing the most recent units as shown on Barbecue with box A. The older events are supported by various indicators, and I show here a few examples. You have offset layers and faults dying upward in the southern block of both sites, see boxes B. You have local abrupt thickening of units, see box C for Barbecue. And in the middle of the log at Tess, a clear southward thrust. And I show you also in box A at the bottom a zoom on an open fissure associated with the thrusts filled with the material from the overlying dark unit. On the Bulnay fault, most of the evidence results from the last earthquake. As you can see, many fault strands die upward in the dark beige sand unit at the top of the section. We could document 2 previous events. The penultimate event corresponds to a group of faults that terminate sharply at the horizon pointed by the top arrow in the detailed photograph on the right. It is associated with a wedge-shaped dark unit just in the middle of the photograph that must have collapsed from neighboring layers. You can also see clear angular unconformities below the event horizon pointed by the arrow. The third event is less constrained, with a few faults cutting the massive dark brown unit at the base of the studied section in the middle. We have also several deeper indicators on the sides of the log, for which we did not get edge control. To sum it up, we have collected a good set of evidence associated with at least 2 ruptures before 1905 on both faults. And in order to reconstruct these seismic histories, we have gathered 23 samples for OSL across the 3 sites. These ages will help us to determine if these previous cycles correspond to a similar sequence as in 1905 or not. But right now we need to wait for the dating process to be completed. And with this cliffhanger, I end this presentation here. I thank you for watching, and I will be happy to answer your questions during the live session on Friday 11th. Goodbye.